All right, we'll say good morning. So first of all, let me begin by thanking our sponsors, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves, Dovi and Nina Elman, for dedicating all of the Shiurim and Drashos this month in honor of their daughter Ayelet becoming a Bas Mitzvah. We wish Ayelet great mazel and hatzlacha as she blossoms into an incredible and strong Jewish woman. I apologize, there were a couple of dedications and sponsorships that I missed last week. My apologies to that. I want to thank David and Roberta Schwartz for dedicating the daf last week in honor of a birth of a baby girl to their children, Leon and Lily Schwartz, born first David and Roberta's first grandchild, the granddaughter, born on Hanukkah, an incredible Hanukkah miracle. We wish the new Zaidi and Bubby a mazel tov, and of course wish the parents incredible hatzlacha raising this precious little neshama. I also want to thank Milt and Melanie Gertner for dedicating the shir again. This was another one I missed last week. I apologize. In memory of Milt's mother, Fruma Bas Yitzchak, on the occasion of her 10th yahrzeit this past Shabbos. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the neshama will have an aliyah and the family a nechama. And also with that, let us begin. So we are picking up in Yirtzeh Hashem, last line on Chav Ches Amud Beis 28b. So mani mas nisim. So both remember again in yesterday's daf. So we discussed the Mishnah, right? A brand new Mishnah that spoke about the idea that chametz shel nochi she'avar lav Pesach. If you have chametz that belong to a Gentile over the course of Pesach, after Pesach it's mutar ba'ana. You're permitted to get benefit from it. But ultimately, again, chametz of a Jew after Pesach is going to be asr ba'ana. One is not permitted to get benefit from it. Why? Because the Torah says lo yira'eh l'cha sa'ar. So both in yesterday's daf, we were trying to figure out whose opinion does the Mishnah reflect. So remember again, what the Gemara did was something very interesting. The Gemara first made the statement that the Mishnah can't be Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Yossi Haglili. In yesterday's daf, we then went through all of those shitos. Really fascinating daf. So now both said, now the Gemara is going to loop back. So mani mas nisin. So whose opinion is reflected in our Mishnah? So the Gemara says, I Rabbi Yehuda, chametz stama kamafilu denachri. So we'll say, remember again, if it's Rabbi Yehuda Shita was that halacha lamaisa that ultimately again bein lifnei zmano bein la'achar zmano over love belav. But this is actually quite fascinating because I think I know, at least for me, this is not the way I read Rabbi Yehuda Shita. By the way, the Gemara is understanding Rabbi Yehuda Shita. First of all, Chevron, it's so wonderful to see everybody, but it's so nice to get a view of the shul. Also, and so nice to see everybody there. Very, very, very heartwarming. Wonderful to see all of you. So I'll say the Gemara says as follows: Rabbi Yehuda Shita was that halacha lamaisa. There is a lav associated with chametz before the Zman Isser, before Pesach, and after Pesach. The Rebbe said, what's amazing about this is as follows. If you notice, Rabbi Yehuda in his Shita never distinguishes between chametz of a Jew and chametz of a non-Jew, which fascinatingly enough leads the Gemara to understand that according to Rabbi Yehuda, there is an Isser of chametz sha'avar alav ha-Pesach, even by a guy. Even by a guy, which is incredible. That according to Rabbi Yehuda, if there was chametz owned by a guy over the course of Pesach, halacha l'maaseh that is asr ba'ana for a Jew after Pesach. Incredible. So the Gemara says, "The money must is in Rabbi Yehuda chametz tamar kamar v'afilu denachri." If it's Rabbi Yehuda just says chametz after Pesach, and he doesn't qualify that statement. Chametz after Pesach is asr, which would indicate even chametz of a guy. So clearly that doesn't reflect the view of our Mishnah, because halacha l'maaseh again, our Mishnah only says that it's chametz of a Jew. The Gemara says I Rabbi Yehuda, and if you want to say it's Rabbi Yehuda, vi Rabbi Shimon, and if you want to say it's Rabbi Shimon, top of Chavtes. So also remember again, Rabbi Shimon said chametz before Pesach and chametz after Pesach. There is no lav, there's no isser. And toch zmano, meaning during Yom Tov itself, during Pesach itself, there's a lav and there's kares. So the Gemara says, V'i Rabbi Shimon, first line, Chavtes Mudalev, V'yisran nami mishra kasher. Both according to Rabbi Shimon, there is no isser of chametz she'avar alav ha-Pesach, ultimately again by a Jew, V'i Rabbi Yossi Haglili, and if it's Rabbi Yossi Haglili, so remember again, Rabbi Yossi Haglili wanted to say something amazing. These shitas are, last week, Shmuel Artman asked me, he said to me, when you see some of these shitas in the Gemara, does it literally mean that like they paskined like this at some point in time? So it is very interesting to see that when you see some of these opinions espoused, lav dafka, it means that they paskin that way, because in general, even if you espoused a particular opinion, if you were the minority, you had to be smart enough to know, don't go like your minority opinion, but it's fascinating that it's out there. Rabbi Yossi Haglili holds that halacha l'maisa chametz during Pesach is not asr ba'ana. It's not asr ba'ana, which is quite dramatic. Rabbi Yossi Haglili avil tochsmano nami mishrak hashari ba'ana. So therefore I will say, so now we understand why the Mishnah said that halacha l'maisa, the Mishnah does not reflect the view of any of these opinions. So I will say, so now obviously we have to reconcile the Mishnah with one of these opinions, because these are the opinions we have. Rav Acha bar Yaakov, the Olam Rabbi Yehuda. So Rav Acha bar Yaakov wants to suggest that the Mishnah is really Rabbi Yehuda. I will say, so remember again, let's be clear on our shitas. The shita of Rabbi Yehuda holds that halacha l'maisa, this was the last part of Chav Ches Amud Aleph. Rabbi Yehuda holds that before Pesach and after Pesach, there is a lav on chametz. When you say before Pesach, that means from the 6th hour to the start of Yom Tov. And chametz sha'avar lav Pesach is going to be aser b'lav. Toch zmano, during Pesach itself, lav and kares. Now, interestingly enough, the reason the Gemara suggested that the Mishnah can't reflect the view of Rabbi Yehuda is because we were understanding Rabbi Yehuda's statement to mean that even on chametz owned by a Gentile after Pesach, there is a lav, which clearly contradicts the Mishnah, because the Mishnah says that the halacha of chametz shavar lava Pesach only concerns the chametz of a Jew. To which the Gemara says, Rav Acha bar Yaakov says, the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Yehuda. And I'm both saying, now watch this. It's quite fascinating. The Yalif Sa'ar Da'achila Misa'ar De're'iyah. And ultimately again, Rabbi Yehuda learns out Sa'ar of Achila from Sa'ar of Re'iyah. Now, what does that mean? Now, remember again. So we'll see in just a moment. The Gemara says, "Mas or deriyah shalcha i'ataroa aval ataroa shalachirim." But say just like with bal yira'ah, ultimately again, you're only chayiv ultimately again if it's your chametz. Aval ataroa shalachirim mishal gavoa. But you can go ahead and see others' chametz, right? So if you see the chametz of others, or you see the chametz of hektish, halacha l'maisi, you are not in violation on Pesach. Av sa'ar da'achila. So too when it comes to the sa'ar of consumption, shelcha i'ata ochel, you are not permitted to eat your chametz. Aval ata ochel shalachirim v'shal gavoa. But you can go ahead and eat the chametz of others. Eat the chametz of others. We'll say, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says over here, the Olam Rabbi Yehudahi, the afagav, the nafgale mikrai de la achar zmano aser, kra bisar di yisrael kamar aval de nochri shari. So we'll say, so remember again, even though Rabbi Yehuda is saying that halacha l'maisa, after Pesach there is a lav, the pasuk from which he learns the lav for chametz sha'avar alav haPesach is dafka talking about chametz that is owned by a Jew. So this is the drasha. So the Gemara says, "Af sor dachila shalcha iyata ochel abata ochel shal achidim mishal gavoa." So in reality, just like the din of bal yira, so this is supposed to this is Rav Acha bar Yaakov. It's according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is the author of the Mishnah, or the opinion reflected in the Mishnah, and Rabbi Yehuda will say as follows: just like on Pesach, you are only over on bal yira with your own chametz, but you are not chayiv on bal yira'eh with someone else's chametz, a Gentile's chametz, a Gentile chametz, someone else. So halacha l'maisa again. So too over here, the Gemara says after Pesach, the lav only applies. The lav only applies to the chametz of a Jew, but ultimately again not to the chametz of others. So remember again, in this others category, you have a nochri, you have gavoa, ubedinhu di ibayde lemisne dafila bachila namishari. Supposed to be very interesting. And really, the Mishnah should have actually written that after Pesach, the chametz of a nochri, both say, is not only mutter ba'ana, but it's actually mutter ba'achila. Mutter ba'achila. You're actually allowed to eat it. Va'aydi de tana di Yisrael aser ba'ana, tana nami de nochri, mutter ba'ana. And halacha l'maisa, since the Tana wrote that Yisrael's is aser ba'ana, wrote that a nochri's is mutter ba'ana. So therefore, we'll say, Rav Acha bar Yaakov wants to suggest that our Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Yehuda. And halacha l'maisa, what the Mishnah is teaching me, and Rabbi Yehuda is teaching me, is that just like, very simple drasha, just like bal yira'eh only applies to my chametz, ultimately again, so too the lav of chametz she'avar lav Pesach only applies quote unquote to my chametz. Now my chametz in this case will ultimately mean a Jew's chametz, will not apply ultimately to a Nachri's chametz, to the point that halacha l'maisa, excuse me, that halacha l'maisa I should even be able to eat the chametz of a Gentile. The only reason the Mishnah didn't write that is because the Mishnah was saying that chametz she'avar alav haPesach for Yisrael is aser bana. Since we phrased it as iser bana, we wrote it by nachri muter bana. Ubedinhu di baile lemisnafilu b'tochs mano muter bana. And in reality, the Mishnah could have even written, both to listen to this, that even within the zman, the chametz of a nachri should be muter bana. Va'aidi detani di Yisrael la'achar zmano. But since we're writing it regarding the chametz of a Jew after the Zman of Pesach, Tana Nami Dinachri La'achar Zmano. So to ultimately again they phrased it as an Achri. Achar Zmano is us. There I will say Rav Achar Bayakov Shita is that the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Yehuda. And although you thought Rabbi Yehuda was saying that when Rabbi Yehuda gave this statement that after Pesach Chametz is governed by a lav, and you assumed that that meant that halacha l'maisa, the lav applies to all types of chametz, even the chametz of a nachri. Kamash malon, no. That according to Rabbi Yehuda, just like chametz during Pesach is only aser if it's yours, i.e. of a Jew's, so too again chametz achar Pesach ultimately again is also only going to be aser if it belongs to a Jew. But chametz of a nachri, technically speaking, is even mutter ba'achila after Pesach. The only reason the Mishnah is talking about hana is because to contrast it with the chametz owned by a Jew after Pesach. That chametz is not only aser ba'achila, but that chametz is going to be even aser ba'ana. And therefore, again, when it talks about the chametz of a nachri shavar lava Pesach, it says that it's mutter ba'ana. But in reality, not only is it mutter ba'ana, it's even mutter ba'achila. Rava says no. The older Rabbi Shimon. So Rava wants to suggest that in fact our Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Shimon. So remember again, Rabbi Shimon's position was chametz before Pesach and chametz after Pesach. There's no lav. No lav at all. Nothing. No prohibition associated with it. And obviously during Pesach itself, ultimately again, there is a lav and kares. So Rava wants to suggest our Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon kinasa kanis hoil va'avarla bebal yirah bal yematzeh. And Rabbi Shimon says, very simple. We'll say Rabbi it's very simple part. Rabbi Shimon, it's knas. It's knas. But what does it mean a knas? It's a rabbinic penalty. That's all. That's all. The entire issue of bal yirah, of chametz she'avar lav Pesach, I will say, is exactly that. There's no psukim involved over here. This is a rabbinic penalty. So we'll say. So we're going to see. In fact, we're going to, I'll leave the halacha l'maisa for a little bit later. But again, we will see that this is indeed the approach that we accept. So we'll say the beauty of this is once you say that it's a rabbinic penalty, there's not really a need to try to find a source for chametz she'avar lav Pesach in any of the aforementioned psukim. So therefore, Rava could say the Mishnah could even reflect the view of Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon holds there is no lav associated with chametz after Pesach. I'll call it before Pesach and after Pesach. The only isra of chametz is during Pesach itself, and then it's a lav and it's kares. It's a lav and it's kares. But halacha l'maisa chametz she'avar lav Pesach will be aser midrabanan, and it's a knas. It's a penalty. It's a penalty. Why? As say, if a Jew retained ownership, ultimately again, over his chametz over Pesach, that means what? That Jew who owned that chametz, he was in violation of bal yirah, bal yimatzeh. It's very important to say. So therefore, again, what Rava will suggest is that according to Rabbi Shimon, therefore, because a Jew violated with his chametz, therefore his chametz becomes aser to everyone. It becomes aser to the owner, but it also becomes aser to everyone else as well. So I will say let's contrast these positions. So therefore I will say we have two opinions. Rav Achar Bar Yaakov holding that the Mishnah reflects the view ultimately of Rabbi Yehuda, and which again, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, therefore again Rabbi Yehuda's understanding that just like Bal Yirah, ultimately again will only apply to chametz that is owned by a Jew. So to post Pesach in the lav, again, the Isra of chametz or Pesach will also only apply to chametz owned by a Jew. Rava is going to say simple, it's Rabbi Shimon, and the whole thing is a knas, the whole thing is a penalty. So let's analyze. Bishlam al Rava Hainu Diktani Shal Yisrael Aser. According to Rava, the Mishnah reads well that it says Shal Yisrael Aser Mishum Shene'amar Lo Yirar. Well, see, remember again, the wording of the Mishnah was a little bit strange as well. Remember how the Mishnah read. The Mishnah said, Chametz shal nachri shavar lava Pesach. You have a chametz of it. I'm just reading to you the Mishnah for just a moment. Chametz that belonged to a Gentile that he owned over Pesach, and now it's post Pesach. Mutter bana. You're permitted to get benefit from it. V'shal Yisrael aser bana, but you can't get benefit from chametz owned by a Jew over Pesach. Why? Shene'emar lo yirah l'cha sa'ar. Because the pasuk says lo yirah l'cha sa'ar. So what does that pasuk lo yirah l'cha sa'ar have to really do with chametz sha'avar lava Pesach? So the Gemara says like this: according to Rava, that makes sense, because according to Rava, the way to read the Mishnah is as follows: if a Jew retained ownership of chametz over Pesach and therefore transgressed the lav of lo yirah, of bal yirah, therefore there is a rabbinic penalty that says that his chametz will be aser after Pesach as well. But according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, the reason why Rabbi Yehuda would hold that there's an Isra Hana on chametz shal lava Pesach is mishum lo ye'achel chametz miboile. Nothing to do with bal yirah, but rather he will learn out from the love of lo ye'achel, as you saw in yesterday's daf. So the Gemara says, misabris aresha koi, sefa koi, aresha koi. No. Do you think that pasuk, when the Mishnah quotes that pasuk of lo yirah l'cha sa'ar, do you think that's going on the end of the Mishnah? No, that's going on the beginning of the Mishnah. How so? V'hachi kamer. This is what it means to say. Chametz shal nachri shavar lava Pesach. If you have chametz owned by a non-Jew, he owned it over Pesach, and now again it's after Pesach. So you have chametz owned by a Gentile over the course of Pesach, and now it is after Pesach. Mutter ba'na. One is permitted to get benefit from it. Why? Mishum shene'emar lo yirah elecha. Because the pasuk says, "Lo yirah elecha, chametz shall not be seen to you." Shalcha iyat haroah. The isra of bal yirah is only lecha, is only your own chametz. Aval atarah shalachirim b'shal gavoah. But you can go ahead and see the chametz of others, and there is no violation. V'yalif su'ar dachila misu'ar diriyah. So therefore, Paul says that's what we just said before. And ultimately, again, we'll learn out the su'ar of achila from the su'ar of riyah, as we just mentioned before. And therefore, again, just like I'm not over on bal yirah, unless of course it's my chametz, so too again with post Pesach consumption, I will not be over on the consumption of chametz after Pesach, unless of course it's my chametz. Therefore, we'll say, interestingly enough, the way it's not just that there's a machlokes in the authorship of the Mishnah. There's a fundamental machlokes how to read the Mishnah. So according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, who's going to suggest that the authorship of the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, the pasuk that the Mishnah quotes, Lo yirah lecha sa'ar, is in fact not going on the case of chametz shal Yisrael, but rather going on the beginning of the Mishnah, chametz shal Nachri. Whereas according to Rava, who says that the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Shimon, the pasuk that's being mentioned is actually halacha l'maisa, talking about the pasuk that's being mentioned is actually talking about chametz shel Yisrael. Okay, it's an interesting reading of the Mishnah. Va'azdil tzamayu, and the Gemara says they both go according to their reasoning. De'itmar ha'ochel sa'ar shel nachri sha'avar lava Pesach. If you eat sa'ar that belonged to a Gentile that he owned over Pesach, so the Gemara says. L'div Rabbi Yehuda, so the Gemara says, according to Rabbi Yehuda, so in other words, if you ate chametz that belonged to a nachri, let me say it differently, a nachri owned chametz over Pesach, now you're consuming that chametz after Pesach. L'div Rabbi Yehuda, so we'll say, according to Rabbi Yehuda Shita, Rava Amar Loke, Rava will say you get malchus for it, Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar Eina Loke, and Rav Acha bar Yaakov will say you won't get malchus for it, Rava Amar Loke, Rava will say you get malchus, why? Lo yalif, because ultimately, again, he doesn't learn it out. Lo yalif Rabbi Yehuda sa'ar da'achila mi sa'ar deriyah. Because ultimately, according to Rava, he doesn't agree with Rav Acha bar Yaakov's interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda. And therefore, according to Rava, Rabbi Yehuda does not learn out sa'ar of achila from sa'ar deriyah. And therefore, again, one will be Right, Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar Ina Loka. Rav Acha bar Yaakov will say you don't get malchus. Why? Yalif Sa'ar Dachila Misa'ar Diriya. Ultimately, again, he will say that Halacha L'maisa you learn out Sa'ar Avachila from Sa'ar Diriya. Good. Shabbos says that's the machlokes. Now watch this. It gets more interesting here. V'hadar Bei Rav Acha bar Yaakov Mehi. Now we'll say in reality, Rav Acha bar Yaakov recanted his position. He recanted his position. Now I will say, now watch this. Very interesting case. If one goes and eats chametz that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash during Yom Tiv, or specifically during Chol Hamoed, what's the halacha? Ma'al. A person has committed me'ilah. V'yesh omrim lo ma'al. Others say you haven't committed me'ilah. But remember again, me'ilah means illegal or mundane use of consecrated property. So what's going on over here? Man yesh omrim. So we'll say, who is the opinion who says lo ma'al? Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana he. They say Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana haya oses Yom Kippurim ki Shabbos l'Tashlumin. Because Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana used to say that Yom Kippur is like Shabbos for Tashlumin. So what does this mean? So this is a classic case the Gemara brings down that halacha l'mayis. Imagine for a moment a person goes in and burns down a field on Shabbos. What's the halacha of a person burns down a field? So we'll say a person burns down a field on Shabbos. There are two prohibitions, right? There's havara, I've kindled something, and halacha l'mayis, there's also nezek, I've caused damage. So we know that there is a concept of kimle b'derabamine, that whenever you go ahead and engage in an act, and that act triggers two forms of liability, one monetary and one capital, right? So halacha l'maisa, the monetary damages are set aside because you're going to be executed. So Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana said he made Yom Kippur like Shabbos l'tashlumin. How so? Ma Shabbos mischay b'nafsho patur min tashlumin. Just like Shabbos, if you do something that violates Shabbos but also causes damage. Once you're mischay b'nafsho, once there's a death penalty, patur min tashlumin. Af Yom Kippurim mischay b'nafsho patur min tashlumin. So therefore, we'll say, for example, if somebody were to go ahead and burn down a field on Yom Kippur, and go ahead, what would be that halacha? And I will say Yom Kippur, violation of Yom Kippur is kares. Shabbos is skila. Yom Kippur is going to be kares, but still Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana said that we make Yom Kippur just like Shabbos. So therefore, halacha l'maisa, the Ish Omrim who says lo ma'al would be Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana. Why Rabbi say, watch this. If you take a piece of chametz that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash and you eat it on Pesach, so I'll say, so there are two things that's happened over here, right? What are the two things? Number one, you ate chametz. Number two, you committed an act of me'ilah. Eating chametz, right, is an iser kares. Going ahead and performing an act of, or engaging in me'ilah is dinei mamanis, right? Is ultimately, again, is going to be financial damages. So therefore, halacha l'maisa, the Gemara is suggesting that the Ish Omrim who say that if you ate chametz on Pesach, you are not subject to the laws of me'ilah, is none other than Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, who's the same person who said that if you burn down a field on Shabbos, you're not going to be chayv for damages. You burn down a field in Yom Kippur, you're not going to be chayv on damages. You ate chametz of the Beis Hamikdash on Pesach, you're going to be chayv kares for chametz, you're not going to be chayv for me'ilah. Rav Yosef Amar, so Rav Yosef says no. In reality, they are arguing about the following case. Can you go ahead and redeem kachim? So we'll say, so imagine for a moment, you have sacrificial items which cannot be consumed by a person. So can you go ahead and redeem them in order to feed them to dogs? So we'll say, so remember again, we're focusing on a brisa. The brisa says over here, ha'ochel chametz shel hektish b'moed ma'al, v'ish omrim lo ma'al. If a person went ahead and ate chametz of hektish on Pesach, some say he committed me'ilah, some say he didn't commit me'ilah. So also we're just trying to figure out whose opinions are being expressed over here. So the Gemara wants to suggest Rav Yosef Amar, Rav Yosef says in reality, they're arguing about if you have kodshim that are not consumable by an individual, can you redeem them in order to feed them to the dogs? I'm sorry, let me read that again. So the opinion who says that ultimately, again, you did commit me'ilah, he holds kasavar podin es hakachim lachim leklavim. He holds that in general you are permitted to redeem inedible kachim in order to give it to dogs. Which say, so what's the comparison here? Because essentially what the Gemara is suggesting is chametz, which belongs to hekdish, is pretty much like inedible kachim. Inedible kachim. So what can you do with inedible kachim? So according to the opinion who says that halacha l'maisa inedible kachim can be redeemed and fed to dogs, that means even if it's inedible, it still has a value. If it has a value, then ultimately again it's subject to me'ilah. So the opinion who says that in general, podines hakachim la'achilon l'klavim, ultimately again will say ma'al. Uman Damar Lo Ma'al, the opinion who says that you did not commit Mi'ilah, halacha l'maisa, kasavar in podin, he will say that in general, if you have inedible kachim, you cannot redeem that in order to feed it to dogs. Good. Ravacha bar Ava Tonale Laha Amud Beis Laha Shmaisa Mishmeid Rav Yosef. So let's listen to this. Ravacha bar Yaakov. Ravacha bar Rava went ahead and taught this Tanale Laha Shmaisa Mishmeid Rav Yosef Bahal Lishna, and he taught it with the following lashon of Rav Yosef: the Kuli Ama in Podin Esak Kachim Nachilin Leklavim. In general, everyone agrees that halacha l'maisa, you can't go ahead and redeem kachim, inedible kachim, to feed it to dogs. Right? That's the general assumption is that halacha l'maisa, you cannot go ahead and redeem kachim to feed it to dogs. V'hacha b'hakamiflagi. So both say here, what's the machlokes? This is very interesting. Both say b'davar hagorem l'mamon kimamon dami. So both say so the shaila over here is davar hagorem l'mamon. So we'll say, so listen to this. So what happens if halacha l'maisa, you have something that right now is valueless, but later on in time, ultimately again, it will be valuable. So what is the status if you damage something like that? So right now, the item is valueless, but later on it will be valuable. So we'll say, what's a good example of that? A person eats chametz of hegdish on Pesach. I eat chametz of hektish on Pesach. So I say halacha l'maisa again. Right now, it's valueless. Right now, it's totally valueless. But ultimately, again, wait a couple of days, and it will be valuable. So the Gemara says, "Man da'amar ma'al." Both say, remember, I just want to be clear. We're right now. Remember, the bigger discussion over here is the Gemara is going to suggest that Rav Achar bar Yaakov recanted his position. Okay, that's what's driving this entire discussion. The way the Gemara is going to get there is through this brisa. I have a brisa that says, "Ha'ochel chametz shel hektish b'moed." If I eat chametz which belongs to the Beis Hamikdash during Pesach itself, ma'al, I have committed mi'ilah. V'yesh omrim lo ma'al, and others say I did not commit mi'ilah. So that's the machlokes that is unfolding over here. We're trying to figure out what is that machlokes based on. So we'll say, remember again, we've had a couple of different possibilities. It's possible that the Yesh Omrim who said that not Ma'ol was Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, about Kimim Rabbi Mine. The other possibility is Podin Esakachim Lachilon Leklavim. That's the second possibility. And now a third possibility ultimately is Davar Hagorim Lemamon Kim Mamon Dami. So I will say, what happens if you quote unquote damage something that right now is valueless, but in a little bit of time will become valuable? Man da'amar ma'al. So the opinion who says ultimately again that you did commit mi'ilah when you eat chametz which belong to the Beis Hamikdash on Pesach, or I should say differently, on Pesach you ate chametz which belong to the Beis Hamikdash. So the man da'amar says ma'al kasavar davar hagarim l'mamon kimamon dami. He also will say even though chametz right now which belongs to the Beis Hamikdash is valueless, because chametz on Pesach generally is valueless, halacha l'maisa, because it will become valuable, therefore halacha l'maisa, you're chayiv, and therefore again it's considered as if you've committed mi'ilah, you've deprived the Beis Hamikdash of a valuable item. Uman damar lo ma'al, but the opinion who says lo ma'al kasavar davar hagarim lamamon lav kimamon dami. The opinion who says lo ma'al, he will hold that halacha l'maisa davar hagarim lamamon will say that if something is currently valueless, but it will become valuable, lav kimamon dami. Okay, so we'll say, so I just want to point out to you, this is in general what's very exciting about Daf Yomi, you're beginning to see like just even looking at three incredible ideas that we just had right now. Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana's idea of kimle midrabba minei, that whenever you violate something, whether it's Shabbos, Yom Kippur, Pesach, and you did one act which generates dual liability. One for misa / kares, and then second for financial liability. The financial liability is set aside, and ultimately, again, it is the capital liability which remains there. Do we redeem kachim, inedible kachim? Do we redeem it to feed it to dogs? That's a machlokes. And now both say davar hagorim lemamon kimamon dami. Ultimately, again, do we go ahead and we say there's something that is valueless? Something that is valueless right now, but will become valuable. If you damage that item, are you considered to have damaged something or not? I'm just pointing out three incredible yisodistic ideas. So we'll say, so now watch this. Rav Achar bar Yaakov comes along and he says, "D'chuli alma davar hagarim lemamon kimamon dami." We'll say everyone agrees that halacha l'maisa Davar hagorin l'mamon kimamon dami. That's what the Gemara is going to suggest over here. Everyone agrees there's something that is currently valueless, ultimately again, but will become valuable. It is as if you have engaged in a proper act of damage. In other words, you've damaged something of value. So therefore, so what's going on in the brisa? Remember, all roads lead back to this brisa. Reuven consumes chametz. Reuven consumes chametz of hekdesh on Pesach. Reuven consumes chametz of hekdesh on Pesach. Has he committed an act of me'ila or not? So first opinion says ma'al. Yesh omrim say lo ma'al. We are trying to figure out what is at the root of that machlokes. So it comes on Rav Acha Bar Yaakov. I'm going to tell you. First of all, kuli alma davar garin kimam kimam. So therefore, I just want to point out what the Gemara is pointing out over here is so far kind of racking this up. The Gemara is going to say, Ein podin es hakachon achim leklavim. So number one, we don't redeem inedible kachim to give it to dogs. That's Aleph. Beis, Rav Acha Bar Yaakov is going to say, davar garin lemamon kimam dami. That in reality, if you damage something that is currently valueless, but will become valuable, it is as if you have truly damaged an item of value. So what's going on over here? So let's say, so what is the brisa? What is the Mishnah all about? So again, what is the brisa of ha'ochel chametz shel hekdesh? What is that all about? To which the Gemara says, watch this. So the Gemara says, v'hacha. So what is the brisa all about? Beplotet Rabbi Huda Rabbi Shimon kamiflagi. Wow, this brisa is actually the machlokes Rabbi Huda and Rabbi Shimon. Watch this. Man da amar lo ma'al k'Rabbi Huda, uman da amar ma'al k'Rabbi Shimon. The opinion who said lo ma'al, that's like Rabbi Huda, and the opinion who said ma'al k'Rabbi Shimon. Both say what's going on over here. Take a look at Rashi. Man da amar lo ma'al k'Rabbi Huda, da amar afla achar Pesach aser bana, v'chol shekain bePesach atzmo. Hilchach lav mamon ika di Yisrael lo chazi v'lav garin lo mamon ika shem yifte lo yena mimenu u'lenachri lo mizdabin tein podin esachashon l'chilek lavim. So therefore again, Rabbi Huda holds that halacha l'maisa there is an isser on chametz after Pesach as well, an isser of chametz after Pesach as well. We'll say that halacha l'maisa. I'm sorry. So we'll say, so again, let me say that once more. The opinion who holds mandamar lo mal Rabbi Huda. So we'll say, the opinion who holds that you don't commit me'ilah when you eat chametz of hekdesh on Pesach. That is like Rabbi Yehuda. Because we'll remember again, like Rashi just said. Rashi said that according to Rabbi Yehuda, chametz even after Pesach is aser bana, and all the more so on Pesach itself. Because it is aser bana, therefore what? It's not mabon. It's not considered to be an item of value. Furthermore, again, ultimately, it's not even a gorim lemamon. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda holds that you're not permitted to go ahead and redeem inedible kachim to give it to klavim. Now, in this case, klavim would also mean nachrim. In other words, I can't go ahead and redeem inedible kachim in order to sell to a Gentile. The Gemara says mandar ma'al, and the opinion who says ma'al ultimately again would hold like Rabbi Shimon. The Gemara Rashi says mandar ma'al Rabbi Shimon da'amar ra'i hula achar Pesach. And Rabbi Shimon will say that since chametz becomes permitted after Pesach, therefore what? Therefore, halacha l'maisa, it is a davar hagorim l'mamon, and therefore again you will be chayiv if you damage it or if you consume it on Pesach. But one second, we'll say. Remember again, the whole reason we got into this is because we wanted to show Rav Acha Bar Yaakov recounted his position. For Rav Acha Bar Yaakov would Amar Rabbi Yehuda Yolav Sar Dachil Misar Dariya. But one second, it was Rav Acha Bar Yaakov was said before that Rabbi Yehuda learned out Sar Dachila from Sar Dariya. Right? Rashi says over here Misar Dariya V'shal Hekdish Af BePesach Muter V'Achar Amar Rabbi Yehuda Lamal. And it was according to this again. Rabbi Yehuda holds that the only type of chametz that's aser after Pesach is the type of chametz that was aser during Pesach. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, chametz shel hekdish is not aser on Pesach. But yet here, ultimately again, Rabbi Yehuda is saying this, Ela Hadr Bey, Rav Acha Bar Yaakov Miahi. Rather, ultimately again, you see that Rav Acha Bar Yaakov recanted this position. Also, look at Rashi, Misar Deriya B'Shal Hektish Af Pesach Mutter, and therefore again, according to Rabbi Yehuda, ultimately again, that the chametz of Hektish will be Mutter even Pesach. V'Hacha Am Rabbi Yehuda Lo Mal, and ultimately here we'll see according to Rabbi Yehuda, he did not commit milas. Therefore, we'll see, you see from here that Rav Acha Bar Yaakov recanted his position, and therefore again he holds that even chametz after Pesach will be asr as well. Okay, Ravashi Amar Duchuli Alma. So also, I just want to point out. So let's kind of bring everything together over here. So remember what we're trying to do. The way we started out ultimately again is we have a Mishnah, right? The Mishnah is pretty. It's funny how like such a straightforward Mishnah could cause such incredible machlokes, right? This, if you look at this Mishnah, when you read this Mishnah, you said finally a simple, straightforward Mishnah, yeah, and anything but a simple, straightforward Mishnah. Remember, the Mishnah told me Chametz Shal Nachri Shavar Lava Pesach is Mutar Bana, Chametz Shal Yisrael after Pesach is Aser Bana, and then the Mishnah quotes the pasuk Lo Yira Lecha Sa'ar. Fine. So now remember the flow of the Gemara. The Gemara begins by saying our Mishnah doesn't reflect the view of anyone. Not Rabbi Huda, not Rabbi Shimon, not Rabbi Yosei Galili. Then we went ahead and on Chav Chesam days went through all of those shitos. Then the bottom of Chav Chesam days we try to say, okay, who does the Mishnah reflect? And we had two opinions. We have Acha Bar Yaakov, who wanted to say that the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Huda, and Rava, who wanted to suggest that the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Shimon. Okay? We'll say, what just happened? The Gemara just said, oh, and by the way, Rav Acha Bar Yaakov changed his tune. He recanted his position, which I will say means for us what? That we are left with only the opinion of Rava, who says that the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Shimon. But 1 second, I will say, what did Rabbi Shimon hold? Rabbi Shimon hold there's no lav of chametz from 6 hours till the start of Pesach, and there's also no lav of chametz after Pesach. Well, if there's no lav before Pesach and there's no lav after Pesach, and the Mishnah says chametz sha'avar lav Pesach, which belonged to a Jew, is going to be aser v'hana, how could that be Rabbi Shimon? To which the Gemara answers, kinas. It's a penalty. And that's why the Mishnah ends off with the pasuk. Shene'emar lo yira l'chasar. If you violated the halachas of lo yira, bal yira, there's a rabbinic penalty that says that halacha l'mais your chametz is going to be asur bana after Pesach. Good. So we'll say that was just the full circle. Here we go. So we'll say, but we're not finished yet. Now we're going to focus a little bit more on this brisa, because the brisa is really very interesting. Right? We'll say, look how much conversation this brisa is stirring. So remember again, we'll say brisa telling us. Ha'ochel chametz shel hakdish b'moed. Right, someone goes. Remember, this is the brisa. You eat chametz that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash on Pesach itself. Two opinions: ma'al, lo ma'al. Trying to continue with that brisa. Rav Ashi Amar duchuli alma in podin. Rav Ashi says, in reality, everyone agrees that halacha l'maisa ein podin es hakachim la'achilin leklavim. That halacha l'maisa you don't redeem inedible kachim to feed it to dogs. Okay. Number two, everyone also agrees. Everyone also agrees that something that is currently valueless but will become valuable, ultimately, again, if you damage it, you are chayav for damages. V'hacha b'pluktis, we'll say, what's the machlokes in the brayso? V'hacha b'pluktis, Rabbi Yossi Haglili Rabbanan kamiflagi. And ultimately, again, we'll say here, it's the machlokes Rabbi Yossi Haglili and the Rabbanan. Man da amar mal Rabbi Yossi, uman da amar lo mal ki Rabbanan. Ultimately, again, we'll say that the Gemara suggests that halacha l'maisa, the one who says ma'al holds like Rabbi Yossi, the one who says you're not ma'al is like the Rabban. I'm going to say, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi, Omer dechuli ama in bodin dagar l'mamon lavki mamon dami. Kilomar dechuli ama l'nachri lo mizdamin on lebepesach. Mishum v'achra pesach dechazi li Yisrael lo mechayvi li dagar l'mamon lavki mamon dami. V'halcha time edemi. So we'll say now I'm skipping to the middle of Rashi. Rashi says, so what's going on over here? Why would it be that you're going to say if you hold in podim esakachim lachlim l'klavim, you hold davar agorim l'mamon. Lav kimamon dami, so it's as if you did not commit an act of damage. So what's going on over here? Mishum tesarla Rabbi Yossi Haglili the Amar aftoch zmano muter bana hilcha chazi lemifrake ulasiko tachas tafshilo. Watch this. So we'll say the opinion who says. So we'll say follow this because it's really just quite fascinating. It's not halach lamaisa, but it's interesting. Which is right now in Rav Ashi's worldview, we hold. Aser, you can't be podeh kachim in podim es hakachim lachilin leklavim. Right? Number one, we do not redeem inedible kachim to feed it to dogs. That's one. Number two, davar hagorim lemamon lav kim mamon dami. Something that is valueless now but will become valuable. If you damage that item now, you are not chayiv for monetary damages. So we'll say, so what's the machlokes in Brisa? Watch this. The opinion who holds that if you consume chametz of hektish on Pesach, that you are chayiv for that, that reflects the view of Rabbi Yossi Haglili. Remember Rabbi Yossi Haglili holds that it is mutter to get hana from chametz on Pesach. Wow. Wow. So then Rabbi said, therefore what? Technically speaking, I could redeem chametz from the Beis Hamikdash on Pesach and ultimately go ahead and use it to kindle a fire. I can't eat it, but I could get benefits from it. I'm finishing Rashi. Therefore, I can go ahead and redeem it, use it as fire underneath my food. The opinion who says that you did not commit mi'ilah, Kirabanan da Amri Chametz bePesach Aser Bana. He holds ultimately again like the Rabbanan who hold that Chametz bePesach is Aser Bana. The Imi Shum de Matzi L'Shei La'achar Zman Kreb Shimon Hashtami Elav Mamonu. So we'll say ultimately again. So this is incredible. So if Ashi wants us to just we'll say so again. This kind of closes it. This kind of closes this sugya out. The last interpretation of the Brisa has Rav Ashi saying number one in Poldinas Hakachel Nachin L'Klavim Aleph. Beis, Davra Garin Lamamon, Lav Kim Mamon Dami. The Machlokes and the Brisa is Rabbi Yosef in the Rabbanon. The opinion who says that if you ate chametz that belonged to Ekdish on Pesach itself, that ultimately again you are going to be chayiv. That is because Rabbi Yosef holds that chametz on Pesach is mutter ba'ana, and therefore technically speaking, you could redeem the chametz from the Beis Hamikdash, and you can go ahead and use it to go ahead and kindle your fire. Versus the opinion who says Lo Ma'al is the Rabbanon, who hold that ultimately again there is an Isser Hana of Chametz on Pesach as well, and therefore the item is totally inconsequential. Beautiful. Amarav, let's go weiter. Amarav, Chametz Bizmano. I will say just you should know Halacha L'Maisa. We paskin like Rava's interpretation of the Mishnah, that the concept of Chametz Shavar Lava Pesach, we'll talk about this more, but the concept of Chametz Shavar Pesach is a knas. It is a penalty. That's it. It's not a daraisa. It's not learned out from a pasuk. The concept of chametz shavar Pesach is a rabbinic penalty. You were in violation of bal yirah. You kept chametz illegally. Therefore, the Rabbanan gave you a what do they call it? A slap on the wrist. Is that the lashon? Right, the slap on the wrist, and therefore your chametz is going to be asr bana for you and for any other Jew after Pesach. Obviously, we don't hold that the chametz of a nachri is asr after Pesach because of the logic espoused in the Mishnah. Beautiful. So Gemara goes weiter. Amarav, Chametz Bizmana. So we'll say now we're going to get into the interesting discussion regarding Ta'aroves Chametz. What happens about mixtures of Chametz? So watch this. Amarav, Chametz Bizmano. So we'll say Chametz Bizmano means Chametz on Pesach itself. Bein Bamino, Bein Shalom. So let me give you a little bit of background. So we'll say in the world of Ta'aroves. So some of you remember this from our Chulun days. But in the world of Ta'aroves, in the world of mixtures, so Halacha L'Maisa, there are two different types of mixtures. There's what's called min b'mino and min b'she'eno mino, which means you have a mixture of two like items, that's min b'mino, or two dissimilar items. In halacha, there's a machlokes if those mixtures are treated the same or treated differently. So we're going to see that now. Here we go. So Amarav, Rav says, chametz bizmano, chametz on Pesach itself, bein b'mino, bein shelo b'mino aser. Whether chametz gets mixed in, b'mino, with a like item, or a dissimilar item, it is going to be asr. Now, both saying, now what's the chiddush over here? The chiddush, what says we're going to see is what Rav is saying is chametz on Pesach is asr b'mashahu. So both say during the rest of the year we have concepts like bittul barov or bittul b'shishim, a whole bunch of other different types of concepts. On Pesach itself, the severity of chametz says that chametz is asr even b'mashu. Chametz is not batal. Chametz is not batal at all. And therefore, again, Rav is suggesting if chametz gets mixed in with something permitted, whether it's mino or eno mino, a like item, dissimilar item, doesn't make a difference. The mixture becomes asr. Shelo bizmano. What happens shelo bizmano? So we'll say, so remember again, we'll define exactly what this means, shelo bizmano. But we'll say, but bepashtos, what this means is before Pesach, after Pesach. So the Gemara says, b'mino aser. If chametz gets mixed in with a similar type of item, then it's going to be aser. Shelo b'mino mutter. Ultimately, again, but if it gets mixed in with a dissimilar item, it's going to be mutter. So the Gemara says, "My askinon." Well, what's the case? Ilema b'nosin tam. I will say, if you would say that the chametz that we're talking about infuses flavor into the mixture. So let's say you have a very potent piece of chametz, whatever it might be, and it infuses flavor into the mixture. Shelo bizmano, shelo b'mino mutter. Then you're going to tell me if it's shelo bizmano, even if it's, let's say before let's say between the 6th hour and the start of Pesach, right? And it's shelo bizmano and it's shelo b'mino. That's going to be mutter. Ha yohiv taima. But also at the end of the day, it's infusing taste. Ella b'mashu. Rather, you have to be talking about We're talking about chametz over here that's not no sin tam. It doesn't infuse flavor, and therefore, it's a minute amount of chametz. So we'll say, so what's happening over here? Chametz bismano. If we're talking about chametz during Shas Isra, i.e. during Yom Tiv itself, bein bamino, bein shelo bamino aser, whether chametz gets mixed in with a like item or a dissimilar item is going to be aser. So we'll say, so Rav holds that halacha lemaisa chametz on Pesach, if it gets mixed in with anything, mino, she'eno mino, it is going to aser the ta'arovas. It is going to aser the mixture. And Rav Latame, the Rav Shmuel Amrit Abayu, kol isurin shebetorah, b'mino b'mashu, shelo b'mino b'no sein tam. Ultimately, again, Rav and Shmuel both say that halacha l'mais, in general, both say, when it comes to all these isurin in the Torah, if they get mixed in with like items, so we'll say if you have an item of iser that gets mixed in with exact same item of heter, so any amount of iser is going to aser the mixture. Shelo b'mino, but if it gets mixed in with a dissimilar item, b'no sein tam, the mixture is only prohibited if the prohibited substance infuses taste. Rav gozer chametz bismano shelo b'mino, atu mino v'shelo. So Rav says that we have to be gozer chametz bismano shelo b'mino. So we're going to answer chametz that goes ahead and gets mixed in. Chametz that gets mixed in on Pesach. Chametz on Pesach that gets mixed in shelo b'mino. We're going to answer that, lest you come to confuse that with the case of chametz b'mino. So we'll see what's happening. So technically speaking, if you have a davar ha'aser that gets mixed in shelo b'mino with dissimilar items, the davar ha'aser only asers the mixture if the iser item infuses taste. But if it doesn't infuse taste, then it's not going to be aser. Rav will say, however, when chametz gets mixed in on Pesach with something, even if it gets mixed in shelo b'mino with a dissimilar item, it's still going to be aser, even if it's a small amount, even if it's not no sin tam. Why? Lest you come to confuse it with the case of mino. Because Rabbi say, again, we're concerned that you're going to confuse the case of eno mino with mino, and you're going to say that just like, again, you need a significant amount of chametz to aser a dissimilar mixture, that you're going to need a significant amount of chametz to aser a similar mixture, and that's not the case. Chametz that falls into mino is aser b'mashu, v'shelo b'zmano b'mino aser Rabbi Yehuda, and ultimately, again, chametz shelo b'zmano will be aser, even if it gets mixed in b'mino. Ultimately, again, like Rabbi Yehuda. So let's remember again, Rabbi Yehuda's shita is that chametz after Pesach, chametz shalav Pesach, is going to be aser mid'oraisa. V'shalo b'mino mutar. V'shalo b'mino mutar d'shalo bizmano. And ultimately, again, I will say, v'shalo b'mino mutar d'shalo bizmano v'shalo b'mino ato mino kule halo gazina. I will say, but halacha l'maisa, if after Pesach, chametz shalav Pesach falls in, gets mixed in together with shelo b'mino, something dissimilar, that's going to be mutter. Why? Because we're going to say we're not concerned the shelo bizmano v'shelo b'mino ato mino, because kuli halo gazrinan. We're not concerned, Rabbi say, that with chametz shalav Pesach, that if we go ahead and we permit shelo bizmano shelo b'mino, chametz after Pesach that gets mixed in with a dissimilar item, we are not concerned that you may come to go ahead and therefore rule leniently in a case of chametz that falls in bimino bizmano. Okay, so we'll say this is the position of Rav. Shmuel holds, again, we're gonna build on these. Shmuel says chametz bizmano chametz bizmano bimino aser. So Shmuel holds that chametz on Pesach itself, bimino, when chametz is chametz on Pesach that gets mixed in with a similar permitted item, aser is going to be aser. Shelo bimino mutter. But if chametz even on Pesach gets mixed in with a dissimilar item, ultimately again it's going to be mutter. The mixture is mutter. Shelo bizmano, but ultimately again after Pesach, bein bimino, bein shelo bimino mutter. So we'll say according to Shmuel, if chametz shalav Pesach gets mixed in, whether it's mixed in with mino or she'eno mino, it's going to be mutter. Chametz bizmano mino b'mino aser. So let's analyze this. Shmuel holds that chametz on Pesach itself that gets mixed in with a similar item is going to be aser. Shmuel l'tamei, the Rabu Shmuel d'amitar bayu kol isurin shebetorah b'mino asurin b'mashu shelo b'mino b'no sin tam. Because both say Shmuel, both Rav and Shmuel hold that halacha l'maisa, any iser that gets mixed in with something mutter, halacha l'maisa again when it gets mixed in with similar items, so then halacha l'maisa is going to be aser mashu any amount. Shelo b'mino dissimilar items, the davar ha'aser will only aser the mixture if it's no sin tam, if it infuses flavor. Shelo b'mina. So the Gemara says, now watch this. Shelo b'minan, atu minan lo gazer. And Shmuel, unlike Rab, Shmuel is not concerned that halacha l'maisa, we don't say, we're not worried that if we permit a mixture of min b'she'eno mino, chametz that gets mixed in with dissimilar items, we are not worried that if we permit that mixture, that you may come to also permit a mixture of min b'mino, of two similar items. So the Gemara says, Shelo b'minon, atu minon lo gazer. Shelo b'zmano, bein b'minon, bein shelo b'minon, mutarin k'Rabbi Shimon. And also when it comes to chametz sha'avar alav Pesach, once that gets mixed in with something, ultimately again, whether b'mino or she'ino b'mino, ultimately again, that is going to be mutter, like Rabbi Shimon. Remember again, Rabbi Shimon holds that chametz sha'avar lava Pesach is only asur after Pesach. Why? Because of a knas. So the rabbinic penalty only applied, according to Shmuel, when the chametz is be'en. When the chametz is extant, it's there by itself. But if the chametz has been mixed into something else, then halacha l'maisa the isur doesn't apply. But Rabbi Yochanan says chametz bizmano bein b'mino bein shelo b'mino asur. So now watch this. The third sheet though. Rabbi Yochanan holds that chametz on Pesach itself, bein b'mino bein shelo b'mino asur. Whether it was mixed in with similar or dissimilar items, it is going to be asur. Asur b'no same tam. But say it'll be asur as long as there's enough chametz to infuse taste. Shelo bizmano, when it's after Pesach, bein b'minon, bein shelo b'minon, mutter. But after Pesach, I will say, if chametz gets mixed in with anything, it is going to be mutter. Chametz bizmano, bein b'mino, bein shelo b'mino, b'no sintam. I will say, let's analyze this. Chametz on Pesach itself, whether it gets mixed in b'mino or shelo b'mino, it is going to be asur if it infuses taste. Rabbi Yochanan Tameh. Rabbi Yochanan goes according to his reasoning. The Rabbi Yochanan v'Reish Lakish Amri Tarvayu Kol Isurin Sheba Torah. All Isurin in the Torah will say bein b'minon, bein shelo b'minon. Whether ultimately again they get mixed in with their min or not with their min, they get mixed in with similar or dissimilar items. What's the halacha? I'm sorry. Bein b'minon, bein shelo b'minon, b'no sein tam. So we'll say this is very interesting. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish hold that we'll say this is in contrast to Rav and Shmuel. Rav and Shmuel both hold that whenever an asur item gets mixed in, so Rav and Shmuel make a distinction ultimately again between minon and she'enon minon. That halacha l'maisa again, when it's minon, then it's going to be asur. When it's shelo b'minon, it's going to be b'no sein tam. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish hold kol isurin shebatorah bein b'minon bein shelo b'minon b'no sein tam. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish hold that halacha l'maisa, anytime there is a mixture, whether it's b'minon, shelo b'minon, everything depends ultimately again, is there enough chametz there or enough isur there to infuse taste? Shelo bizmano, bein b'mino, bein she'eno b'mino, mutar k'Rabbi Shimon. Both have a chametz shalav ala Pesach. Ultimately, again, whether it gets mixed in b'minon or b'shelo b'minon, will be mutar like Rabbi Shimon, who holds that chametz shalav ala Pesach is only asur al tzeknas, not asur min da'oraisa, and it's only asur when the chametz itself is extant by itself. But if the chametz gets mixed in, then it's going to be mutter. Bosai, we will stop over here for today. I'm going to leave you a little bit on a cliffhanger. We will see ultimately again the halacha l'maisa on this sugya. Bosai, this is actually an incredibly important sugya. This is the sugya of ta'aroves chametz. Right? What do you do about mixtures of chametz? We all know chametz is aser. What about chametz that gets mixed into something else? What are the halachas concerning ta'aroves chametz? In Meretz Hashem, we will see the halacha l'maisa tomorrow. But I say thank you all. Such a schus to learn with all of you. Have a wonderful day. Shekayach, everyone.